On the 23rd of February, 1995, Nick Leeson left a note on his desk in Singapore. It read, "I'm sorry." Then he and his wife left their apartment and flew to Kuala Lumpur. They had no plan. He knew what was behind him, and he knew he could not fix it. What was behind him was account 88888, a secret trading account at Barings Futures Singapore, invisible to the bank's management in London, holding losses that had grown from a few £1,000s in 1992 to £827 million, twice the bank's entire available trading capital. A number so large that when auditors found it 3 days after Leeson fled, there was nothing left to discuss. The bank was insolvent. Barings Bank had been founded in 1762 by Sir Francis Baring. It had financed the British government during the Napoleonic Wars. It had arranged the Louisiana Purchase, the transaction by which the United States bought 828,000 square miles of territory from France for $15 million. It had managed the personal accounts of Queen Elizabeth II. It was the oldest merchant bank in Britain. 3 days after Leeson left his note and fled, Barings was sold to the Dutch financial group ING. The price was £1. One trader, one account, 233 years of history. Nicholas William Leeson was born in Watford, England, in 1967. He left school at 18 and worked as a clerk at Coutts & Co., then at Morgan Stanley, before joining Barings Securities in London in 1989. He was good at his job, diligent, detail-oriented, fast. By 1992, Barings had sent him to Singapore to help set up the derivatives trading operation at the Singapore International Monetary Exchange, known as CIMEX. In Singapore, Leeson thrived. He passed the qualifying exam to trade on CIMEX and was appointed General Manager of Barings Futures Singapore. His job, officially, was to run a low-risk arbitrage operation, exploiting tiny price differences between identical Nikkei 225 futures contracts traded simultaneously on CIMEX in Singapore and the Osaka Securities Exchange in Japan. When the price on one exchange was slightly higher than on the other, Leeson would buy on the cheaper exchange and sell on the more expensive one, pocketing the difference. Safe, mechanical, profitable. In 1992 and 1993, the arbitrage was generating real profits, approximately £10 million a year, or 10% of Barings' total annual profits. London was delighted. Leeson was celebrated, and London left him alone. The problem started small. In July 1992, one of Leeson's junior colleagues made a mistake. She sold 20 futures contracts that a client wanted to buy. The error created a small loss. To avoid embarrassing her, and to avoid the paperwork of reporting the error through official channels, Leeson created a separate account to park the loss, account 888888. He would deal with it later. He never did. By September 1992, account 88888 held losses of $8.8 million, approximately £4 million. By December 1994, the losses had grown to $373.9 million, approximately £208 million. And Leeson had been making unauthorized speculative bets to try to recover them, not cautious arbitrage. The £10 million London thought he was generating was fiction. The account, 8888888, 8888 was growing every month. And nobody in London asked the right questions because the profits Leeson reported looked so good. The structural failure that made everything possible was a single management decision. Leeson controlled both the front office and the back office. In a properly run trading operation, these two functions are separated by design. The front office executes trades. The back office processes them, reconciling accounts, verifying positions, confirming that what traders claim to have done matches what actually happened. Separation of these functions is the most basic internal control in financial services. If the same person does both, they can execute trades and then process them in whatever way they choose. They can make the records say anything. Leeson controlled both. He had been given the dual role, partly because of his background in settlements. He understood back-office work, and partly because Barings' Singapore operation was small and had not yet grown to the point where separate heads of department seemed necessary. An internal audit conducted in August 1994 explicitly flagged the problem, recommending that responsibilities be separated to reduce the possibility of error and fraud. A second audit in October 1994 raised the same concern. Both times, management chose not to act. Leeson was generating impressive profits. Restructuring would be disruptive. The decision was made to leave him in place. By end of 1994, account 88888 held losses of approximately £208 million, and Leeson was using a strategy that risk managers call doubling. When a position moves against you, you double the bet, betting that the market will turn and your losses will be recovered. The logic of doubling is seductive. If the market moves your way after you double, you recover everything. The problem is that the market does not always move your way, and when it doesn't, doubling produces losses that are catastrophic rather than merely large. Leeson was doubling on the Nikkei 225, betting heavily that the Japanese stock market index would rise. By January 1995, he controlled approximately half of all open interest in Nikkei futures on Simex and 85% of Japanese government bond futures. Other traders on the exchange could see his positions. They knew someone was running a dangerously large, long bet on Japan. They began trading against him. At 5:46 inches the morning of the 17th of January 1995, an earthquake of magnitude 6.9 struck the city of Kobe, Japan. The Great Hanshin earthquake killed more than 6,000 people, injured tens of thousands more, and destroyed or damaged more than 400,000 buildings. It also collapsed the Nikkei. The Japanese stock market fell sharply in the days that followed. For Leeson, who was betting heavily that it would rise, the earthquake was catastrophic. His losses, which had been large but potentially recoverable with a market recovery, now accelerated. His response was to double again. Over the following 5 weeks, he increased his long position on the Nikkei from approximately 30,000 contracts to over 60,000. He was now betting with money he did not have, and that Barings could not cover that Japan would recover quickly from the earthquake. It did not recover quickly enough. Throughout this period, Barings' management in London was sending increasingly large sums of money to Singapore. Leeson had told them the funds were needed to meet margin calls on client positions, customers whose accounts required collateral because of market movements. The London team did not fully understand what the money was for. They sent it anyway because Leeson's operation had been so profitable and they trusted him. By February 23, the losses in account 88888 had exceeded £827 million. That morning, a settlements clerk spotted a discrepancy and brought it to management. Leeson left his note and fled. 3 days later, after a weekend during which the Bank of England attempted and failed to organize a rescue, Barings was declared insolvent. Leeson and his wife were arrested in Frankfurt on the 2nd of March 1995. He had been trying to get back to Britain. He was extradited to Singapore, tried on 2 counts of fraud and forgery, and sentenced to 6.5 years in Changi prison. During his imprisonment, he was diagnosed with colon cancer. He survived. He was released in July 1999, having served 4 years and 3 months. The collapse of Barings produced immediate and lasting changes in the regulation of derivatives trading and bank risk management. CIMEX and its successor, the Singapore Exchange, strengthened controls on large open positions. Regulators globally tightened requirements for separation of front office and back office functions. The Bank of England conducted a detailed inquiry into what had happened and published its findings. The concept of the rogue trader, a single individual whose unauthorized bets bring down an institution, entered public consciousness. Leeson's story became a book, Rogue Trader, and then a film starring Ewan McGregor. The story was so cinematically clean that it almost obscured the institutional failures that made it possible. Because Leeson was not, in the end, what happened to Barings. What happened to Barings was a series of institutional decisions that created the conditions for one person to accumulate and hide £827 million in losses over 3 years. The dual role was allowed to continue despite 2 audits recommending otherwise. London sent hundreds of millions of pounds to Singapore without a clear explanation of what the margin calls were for. The profits Leeson reported were never independently verified. CIMEX wrote letters about account 88888 and its large funding requirements that Barings received and did not adequately follow up. The bank's bonus culture meant that everyone who benefited from Leeson's reported profits had a personal incentive not to look too hard at where they came from. Barings was not brought down by a rogue trader. It was brought down by an institution that chose not to look at every point where looking might have saved it. The bank was sold for £1. ING eventually closed the Barings brand. Nick Leeson went on to become chief executive of Galway United Football Club in Ireland, wrote books about risk management, and gave corporate lectures on the lessons of Barings. The note he left on his desk read, "I'm sorry." 233 years of British financial history, the Louisiana Purchase, the Napoleonic Wars. The Queen's account sold for £1 sterling because nobody in London wanted to spoil a good profit story by asking where the profits actually came from. That's where the money really went. This was Dark Ledger. Subscribe if you want to know where else the money really went.